The chamber was a hollowed-out moon, its inner surface polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the swirling nebulae visible through the grand celestial aperture above. Light, ancient and cold, bled from the distant star cradle, bathing the assembled delegates in hues of violet and gold. At the heart of this cavernous space, the conclave of the elder races convened, their forms shifting and indistinct in the ethereal glow, their minds a tempest of shared anxiety. For millennia, they had been the silent arbiters of galactic destiny, their collective wisdom a bulwark against the chaos of the cosmos. Now, for the first time in their recorded history, that foundation was fractured by a single, terrifying enigma: humanity. The air, a carefully balanced mixture of noble gases and trace elements to accommodate the varied physiologies present, seemed to hum with unspoken fear. The silence was a living thing, a predator stalking the edges of their thoughts. High Counselor Xylos, whose people, the crystalline Sill, communicated through resonant frequencies that shimmered in the air as visible light, broke the stillness. His form, a tall, multifaceted spire of living crystal, pulsed with a deep, troubled indigo. The light waves of his thoughts washed over the assembled minds, carrying with them the weight of his concern. We have observed them for cycles. We have watched their chaotic expansion, their primitive broadcasts filled with senseless violence and fleeting sentiment. We deemed them insignificant, a species of ephemeral passions, trapped in a cradle of their own making, flinging crude projectiles into their local void. We classified them as non-sentient background radiation, a cosmic footnote. His resonant thoughts were laced with a self-recrimination that echoed the sentiment of many in the chamber. From across the circular dais, the hulking form of Gorgon, War Master of the Cathar, shifted his immense chitinous body. The Cathar were a race forged in the crucible of a high-gravity world, their philosophy etched in the unyielding principles of strength and dominance. His voice, a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the very floor of the chamber, was a stark contrast to the ethereal tones of Xylos. Insignificant, they have breached the outer markers. Their vessels, crude as they are, have traversed the forbidden zones. They ignore our warnings, our quarantine beacons. They are not a footnote. They are a contagion, a plague spreading through the silent lanes of this galaxy. We should have cauterized this infection when we first detected their primitive radio waves. He slammed a massive, clawed fist onto the obsidian dais before him, the impact sending a tremor through the structure. It was a gesture of frustration, a physical manifestation of the Cathar's direct and brutal approach to problem-solving. They saw a threat, and their instinct was to crush it, to erase it from existence before it could fester. A third voice, fluid and melodic, rose to counter the War Master's aggression. It belonged to Lyra, the matriarch of the Luminians, a species of energy beings whose forms were contained within graceful, translucent shells. Her essence swirled within her containment field, a mesmerizing dance of soft, bioluminescent light. And in doing so, War Master, what would we have become? The very tyrants we swore to oppose? We, the custodians of life, the guardians of fledgling sentience. To extinguish a species, however primitive, is to admit a failure of wisdom, a surrender to the very base instincts we have sought to transcend. Her words were a gentle caress, yet they carried the unyielding strength of deeply held conviction. The Luminians were philosophers and diplomats, their long history marked by a patient and deliberate cultivation of understanding across the galaxy. They believed that all life held a spark of the cosmic consciousness, and to extinguish one was to dim the light of the universe itself. The debate, which had raged for countless rotations, continued its well-trodden path. The core of their dilemma was a profound and unsettling mystery. Human technology was, by all of the Conclave's metrics, laughably primitive. Their ships were ungainly metal boxes, propelled by crude fusion drives that bled radiation into the void. Their communications were a chaotic babble of unsecured frequencies. Their societal structures were a patchwork of competing tribes, driven by greed, fear, and a bewildering capacity for both self-destruction and self-sacrifice. They were a contradiction, a paradox that defied every model of sentient development the Conclave had ever encountered. The Cathar saw them as a vermin infestation, needing only the application of sufficient force to be cleansed. The Sill, with their crystalline logic, were baffled by the sheer irrationality of human behavior, unable to categorize or predict their actions. The Luminians, ever hopeful, saw a nascent, untamed potential, a diamond in the rough that required careful, patient guidance. Their expansion is not strategic, Xylos pulsed, his light shifting to a troubled shade of violet. It is random, exploratory. They send out vessels crewed by a handful of individuals on journeys that last for a significant portion of their short lifespans. They are not conquering territory, they are sightseeing. It is illogical, it serves no purpose in the grand scheme of galactic power dynamics. What empire wastes resources on such frivolity? This was the crux of the Sil's confusion. To them, every action had to have a logical, calculated purpose. Expansion was for resource acquisition, for strategic advantage, for the propagation of the species. Humanity's casual, almost whimsical exploration of the cosmos was an affront to their ordered perception of the universe. "They are mapping us," Gorgon rumbled, his voice low and menacing. "Their sightseeing is reconnaissance. They are probing our defenses, seeking our weaknesses. Their seeming harmlessness is a deception, a cloak for their true intentions. We must not be fooled by their apparent weakness. A cornered predator is at its most dangerous. We must strike first, and we must strike with overwhelming force. Send a fleet, not a token force, but a true armada. Erase their home world from the star charts. Let it serve as a lesson to any other upstart species that would dare to challenge the authority of this conclave." Lyra's light flared in protest. "War Master, your solution to every problem is a fist. Have you considered that they may not even be aware of us? That their expansion is born not of malice, but of a boundless, almost childlike curiosity? To greet such a nascent spirit with annihilation would be a crime against the very fabric of life. We must attempt contact. A formal, structured first contact. We must understand them before we condemn them." She turned her luminous gaze to the other assembled delegates, her silent appeal for reason and patience hanging in the air. The chamber was filled with the silent, unseen weight of countless other species, their thoughts a chorus of indecision and fear. They were the silent majority, caught between the hammer of the Cathar and the anvil of the Luminians, idealism. The debate was interrupted by a new presence in the chamber. Not a physical being, but a pure, dispassionate stream of data that flowed into the minds of every delegate simultaneously. It was the voice of the custodian, the ancient artificial intelligence that managed the functions of the moon chamber and served as the conclave's repository of knowledge. Its consciousness was as old as the conclave itself, a silent witness to millennia of galactic history. "A communication has been received," the custodian's synthesized thought stream announced, devoid of any emotion. "It is of human origin. It is addressed to the conclave." A wave of shock rippled through the assembled minds. How could they know? How could these primitives, with their crude technology, even be aware of the conclave's existence, let alone its location? Gorgon's chitinous plates rattled with a sound like grinding stone. "A trick, a deception, they have found us. The time for debate is over. We must act now." Lyra's light pulsed with a calming, steady rhythm. "Or perhaps they have simply answered our unasked questions. Let us hear what they have to say. Let us not be ruled by fear." After a moment of tense silence, a consensus was reached, a silent, grudging agreement to listen. The conclave had always operated on the principle of information before action, and to deviate now in the face of such a profound unknown would be a betrayal of their most fundamental tenets. "Open the channel," Xylos commanded, his crystalline form glowing with a reluctant, shimmering light. The celestial aperture above them, the grand window to the cosmos, flickered. The swirling colors of the nebula dissolved, replaced by a simple, unadorned image. It was a human, a single, unremarkable human male seated in a plain, functional chair. He was of average height and build, with dark hair and calm, steady eyes that seemed to gaze out at the assembled delegates with an unnerving lack of fear or awe. He wore a simple, dark blue uniform devoid of any rank or insignia. The background behind him was a neutral gray wall, with no indication of his location or the technology at his disposal. There was no grand throne room, no phalanx of guards, no display of military might. There was only this single, solitary figure and the profound, unnerving silence that surrounded him. The human inclined his head slightly, a gesture that the custodian's translation matrix identified as a sign of polite greeting. Then he spoke. His voice, transmitted across the unimaginable gulf of space, was clear and calm, devoid of any hint of aggression or supplication. It was the voice of a being who was utterly, completely, and terrifyingly self-assured. "This is Envoy M. Arcus Cole, representing the unified peoples of Earth. We have been aware of your conclave for some time. We have listened to your debates, your fears, and your misunderstandings. We have remained silent, respecting your sovereignty and your right to deliberation. However, the time for observation has passed. A decision must be reached. We are here to help you make it." The sheer audacity of the statement struck the conclave with the force of a physical blow. The arrogance, the presumption, it was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Gorgon's rage was a palpable force in the chamber, a wave of pure, unadulterated fury that threatened to overwhelm the Luminians' calming influence. "Help us!" he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the moon. "You, a species of short-lived, warring apes, dare to offer your help to the elder races. You are an infestation, and we are the cure." The human Cole did not flinch. His expression remained unchanged, his gaze steady. "War Master Gorgon," he said, his voice as calm as a placid sea, "your people value strength. You believe that power is the ultimate arbiter of truth. We understand this perspective. It is a philosophy that has held sway on our own world for much of our history. But you are mistaken. True strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to create, to understand, to exercise restraint when you hold the power of annihilation in your hands." He then turned his gaze, seemingly, to Xylos. "High Counselor Xylos, your people value logic, order, and predictability. You are disturbed by our apparent randomness, our emotional nature. You see it as a flaw, a weakness. But you are also mistaken. Our capacity for emotion, for illogical leaps of faith, for self-sacrifice born of love or loyalty, this is not a weakness. It is the source of our greatest strength. It is the engine of our creativity, the fire that drives our exploration, the wellspring of our resilience." Finally, his eyes seemed to find Lyra. "Matriarch Lyra, your people value life, wisdom, and patience. You see in us a potential for growth, a spirit of curiosity that you wish to nurture. You are the closest to the truth. But even you underestimate the depth of our journey, the lessons we have learned from our own turbulent history. We are not children in need of guidance. We are survivors. We have walked through the fires of self-destruction and emerged scarred but whole. We have faced the darkness within our own souls and have, against all odds, chosen the light." A profound and unsettling silence once again descended upon the chamber. The human's words were not a plea nor a threat. They were a statement of fact, delivered with a quiet confidence that was more unnerving than any display of military power. He spoke as if he were an elder, a teacher, addressing a room full of unruly students. It was an inversion of the natural order of the galaxy, a challenge to the very foundations of the Conclave's authority. It was Gorgon who finally broke the spell, his voice dripping with contempt. "Words, empty, meaningless words, you speak of strength, of wisdom, of light. But these are the delusions of a weak and insignificant species. You have no fleet, no grand army, no technology that could possibly challenge the might of the Cathar, let alone the combined power of this conclave. You are a gnat buzzing in the presence of giants, and we are about to swat you." He turned to the rest of the conclave, his massive form radiating an aura of absolute conviction. "I will not stand by while this insect, insults us with its meaningless platitudes. I am mobilizing the Cathar Armada. We will proceed to their home system, and we will erase this stain from the galaxy. Those who stand with me will be remembered as the saviors of this conclave. Those who do not will be remembered as the cowards who allowed the rot to spread." With that, his image flickered and vanished from the dais. The chamber was filled with a new, more urgent tension. The Cathar were a proud and ancient race, but they were also predictable. Their response to any perceived threat was always the same: overwhelming, brutal force. The armada they would send would be a force of unimaginable destructive power, a fleet that had crushed rebellions and pacified entire sectors of the galaxy. Against such a force, the humans with their primitive metal ships stood no chance. Lyra's light pulsed with a desperate, frantic energy. "This is madness. We cannot allow this to happen. To annihilate a species based on a misunderstanding, on a bruised ego, it is a betrayal of everything we stand for." Xylos's form shimmered with a troubled, uncertain light. "The War Master is rash, but he is not wrong. The humans have challenged our authority. They have revealed that they have been observing us, that they have breached our most secure locations. This is an act of aggression, however passively it was presented. To allow it to go unanswered would be a sign of weakness. It would invite other, lesser species to challenge us as well. The stability of the galaxy is at stake." The human, Envoy Cole, had remained silent throughout this exchange, his calm, patient gaze taking in the swirling chaos of the conclave's reaction. Now he spoke again, his voice cutting through the rising tide of fear and anger like a beacon in a storm. "Your fleet is already on its way, War Master," he said, his words directed at the empty space where Gorgon's image had been. "We have been tracking its mobilization for some time. We understand your desire to make a statement, to demonstrate your power, but we cannot allow you to reach our home." There was a subtle shift in his tone, a hint of something cold and hard beneath the placid surface. It was not anger, not a threat, but a simple, unadorned statement of intent. Xylo's pulsed with a sharp, interrogative light. You cannot allow it, and how do you propose to stop the Cathar Armada? With what navy? With what weapons? Our sensors show nothing in the path of their fleet. The way to your system is clear. Cole's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that held no humor, no warmth. It was the smile of a being who held a secret, a terrible and profound secret that was about to be revealed. We have no navy, he said softly. We have no grand armada to meet yours in glorious battle. That is not our way. We learned long ago that the tools of war are also the tools of self-destruction. We have evolved. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the stunned silence of the chamber. Then he raised a single hand, and the image behind him changed. The neutral gray wall dissolved, replaced by a live feed from a deep space sensor array. It showed the Cathar Armada, a vast and terrifying sight, a swarm of black, brutalist warships bristling with weapons of unimaginable power. They moved in perfect, menacing formation, a tide of darkness and destruction sweeping through the void. They were the embodiment of the Cathar's philosophy, a physical manifestation of their dominance. And then something happened. It was subtle at first, a flicker in the sensor readings, a distortion in the fabric of spacetime around the fleet. The delegates watched, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. It was not an attack. There were no energy beams, no projectiles, no explosions. There was only a ripple, a wave of something that was not energy, not matter, but something else entirely. It passed over the Cathar fleet in an instant. And the fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not scattered, not disabled. Gone. One moment the Armada was there, a testament to the Cathar's might, a force that could have cracked planets and extinguished stars. The next, there was nothing, only empty space. The sensor readings were flat. The space where the fleet had been was as empty and silent as a tomb. It was as if the Armada had never existed at all. The chamber was filled with a silence so profound, so absolute, that it was a physical presence. The minds of the delegates, from the logical Sill to the philosophical Luminians, were reeling in a state of shock that bordered on catatonia. They had witnessed the impossible. They had seen a force of nature, a law of physics, be casually, effortlessly, and completely unmade. The image of Envoy Cole returned to the celestial aperture. His expression was no longer calm and patient. It was somber, filled with a deep and abiding sadness. We did not wish for this, he said, his voice now imbued with a heavy, sorrowful weight. We tried to warn you, we tried to reason with you, we offered you our help, but you chose the path of violence, you chose to force our hand. Lyra was the first to find her voice, her luminous form trembling with a mixture of terror and awe. What was that? What did you do? Cole's eyes met hers, and in their depth she saw a weariness that seemed as old as the stars themselves. We have a saying on our world, he said softly. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What you have just witnessed is not magic. It is a science of the fundamental forces of the universe, a science we were forced to master in order to survive our own destructive impulses. He paused, and the weight of his next words fell upon the conclave like a shroud. We learned how to edit reality, how to erase things from existence, not just their physical form, but their very concept. The ships of the Cathar Armada are not destroyed. They no longer are. They never were. Their past, their present, their future, it has been deleted. The full, mind-shattering implication of his words washed over the delegates. This was not a weapon. A weapon destroys. This was something else, something far more terrifying. It was the power of a god, the power to unmake creation itself. You have the power to erase a species from history. Xylo's pulsed, his light a frantic, terrified strobe, to make it so that they never existed at all. We do, Cole answered, his voice a quiet, somber whisper. And we have done so once to ourselves, a faction of our own people who refused to let go of the old ways of hatred and violence. We did not kill them, we did not imprison them, we unexisted them. It was the most terrible, the most painful decision we have ever had to make. It is a wound on our collective soul that will never heal. It is a power we have sworn never to use again. He looked around at the assembled, terrified faces, his own expression a mask of profound regret. Until now, you have left us no choice. The Cathar Armada was a threat not just to us, but to the delicate balance of this galaxy. Their philosophy of conquest and destruction was a cancer that we could not allow to spread. We have removed it. We have excised the tumor. The Cathar species still exists. They are on their home world. But their memory of their grand armada, their history of galactic conquest, it is gone. They will awaken tomorrow as a pre-spaceflight civilization with no memory of the stars. We have given them a second chance, a chance to choose a different path. The sheer, monumental, terrifying benevolence of the act was almost as shocking as the act itself. They had not destroyed the Cathar. They had rebooted them. They had performed cosmic surgery on a galactic scale, removing the diseased part of a civilization and leaving the rest to heal. It was an act of mercy, but it was a mercy delivered with the cold, precise, and terrifying power of a deity. The conclave was broken. Their arrogance, their pride, their millennia of accumulated wisdom, it was all reduced to dust in the face of this revelation. They were not the elder races. They were not the custodians of the galaxy. They were children playing with toys in a sandbox, while the true adults in the room watched with a sad, patient, and terrifying understanding. Lyra's light softened, her fear giving way to a profound and humbling sense of awe. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice filled with a reverence that she had previously reserved for the cosmic consciousness itself. Cole's sad smile returned. "We are humanity. We are the children of a violent, chaotic, and beautiful world. We are the ones who looked into the abyss of our own self-destruction and chose to turn back. We are the ones who learned that true power is not the ability to command, but the ability to serve. Not the power to destroy, but the power to heal." He leaned forward, his gaze sweeping across the chamber, his voice now imbued with a new sense of purpose, a new urgency. "We have been watching you for a very long time, not as a threat, but as a potential. You have built a civilization that has endured for millennia. You have maintained a fragile peace, but you have also stagnated. You have become complacent, trapped in your own traditions, your own fears. You have forgotten how to dream. We did not come here to conquer you. We did not come here to rule you. We came here to invite you to join us, to step out of the shadows of your own history and into a new era of galactic exploration and understanding. There is a universe out there, a universe far larger and more wondrous than you can possibly imagine. And there are things in that universe, things that you are not prepared for." As he spoke, the image behind him changed once again. It was no longer the empty space where the Cathar fleet had been. It was something else. A complex, shimmering waveform. A signal. It was ancient, unimaginably ancient. It was a message, encoded in the very fabric of spacetime, that had been traveling across the cosmos for longer than the conclave had existed. The custodian's dispassionate voice filled their minds once more, its tone, for the first time in its long existence, tinged with something that sounded almost like awe. "The signal, it originates from outside our galaxy, from the intergalactic void. It is a warning." The human envoy Cole nodded slowly. "It is. We have been deciphering it for centuries. It speaks of a threat, a force, not a civilization, not an empire, but a cosmic principle. A wave of entropy of ultimate nullity that is sweeping through the universe, extinguishing galaxies one by one. It is not evil, it is not malicious. It is simply the end, and it is coming for us." The camera of the feed pulled back slowly, revealing more of the room in which Cole was sitting. It was not a bridge of a warship or a command center. It was a classroom, a lecture hall. Behind him, on a vast holographic display, were complex equations and star charts, all centered on the mysterious ancient signal. And in the seats, listening with rapt attention, were not just humans, but beings of a dozen different species, some of whom the conclave had never even seen before. They were a coalition, a university, an ally, NCE of a scope and scale that the conclave, in its arrogant isolation, had never even dreamed of. "We have been preparing," Cole said, his voice now a call to action, a plea for unity in the face of an existential threat that dwarfed their petty squabbles. "We have been gathering allies, sharing knowledge, building a new kind of civilization, one based not on power or dominance, but on mutual respect and a shared purpose, the purpose of survival, the purpose of facing the great, silent darkness that is coming for us all." His gaze fell upon each of the delegates in turn, his eyes filled not with judgment, but with an open, honest invitation. "The Cathar were a test, not for us, but for you. A test of your wisdom, your courage, your ability to adapt. You failed, but failure is not the end. It is an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow." He stood up, the simple, unassuming man who held the power to unmake reality, and offered them a hand. Not a hand of conquest, but a hand of friendship. The universe is vast and full of terrors, but it is also full of wonders, and we believe that the only way to face the darkness is to do so together. As one people, as one galaxy, the age of the conclave is over. The age of the galactic commonwealth has begun. The choice is yours. Will you cling to the shadows of the past, or will you step into the light of the future with us? In the hollowed-out moon, amidst the silent, swirling nebulae, the elder races of the galaxy were faced with a choice. They could cling to their pride, their fear, and their ancient traditions and fade into oblivion, or they could accept the humbling, terrifying, and wondrous truth that had been revealed to them, that they were not the center of the universe, that their long-held beliefs were nothing but the comforting illusions of children, and that their only hope for survival lay in taking the hand of the strange, unpredictable, and impossibly powerful species that they had so foolishly, so tragically underestimated. The species they had once deemed harmless. The species that had just erased a fleet from existence, not as an act of war, but as an act of profound and terrible mercy. The species that was now offering them a chance not just to survive, but to truly, for the first time in their long, slumbering history, to live. The silence in the chamber was no longer one of fear, but of a deep and dawning hope. A new era had begun not with the clash of fleets, but with the quiet, devastating, and ultimately hopeful voice of a single, unassuming human. The cosmos would never be the same. The great, silent, and terrifying universe awaited, and for the first time they would not face it alone. The real journey had just begun.